Yes, and a very good morning to you. When we think gang-related areas or gangsterism, we commonly think, yes, areas like Mitchell's Plain and areas where we saw Leanne Jansen earlier this morning, like Lavender Hill. And here, Westbury, we know in Johannesburg is notorious. But in Durban, it's very rare that you hear about incidents of gangsterism. What are you finding?
That's right, Viveka. In fact, it's not uncommon in Durban, in the broader Durban area for that matter, even in Phoenix, where I am now. And the reason why we are in this area this morning, we're in Unit 2 in Phoenix, is because this was one of the areas that was cast into the spotlight recently, and that was after that shooting that we saw in Mhlanga last week. And there, Calvin Periasamy was shot dead at a parking lot in the Gateway Mall. Now, Calvin Periasamy was quite well known in this area. Some call him a businessman, others call him a criminal. In fact, he was facing several charges, one of murder as well as related to drug dealing as well. But there's a lot of speculation as to whether he was in fact involved in those crimes. He was, for a fact, though, involved in several businesses, which include the tow truck industry, trucking industry, as well as in the taxi industry as well. But he was a leading figure in one of the gangs in this area, and that was called the Bloods Gang, and very well known just by the community. Police won't confirm all of those details around the issues of gangsterism, but we're having a conversation this morning with Glenn Naidu from KZN VIP Security. He's a former policeman and he's worked in the area. He continues to work in the area with his company. And Glenn, you were saying to me that gangsterism is not new in Phoenix. It's been happening all of this time. It's just that it's been cast into the spotlight now with this recent shooting.
That's correct. Gangsterism first started in the area where we are presently standing with the emergence of the so-called township. Gangs grew up with the township, and one of the first gangs was a gang called the High Chaparral. They dealt with liquor illegally and then progressed into drugs.
Right now, what is the situation that we find on the ground? You were saying to me also earlier that a lot of young people are attracted to this lifestyle, and that is perpetuating the existence of gangs in the area.
That's correct. Firstly, gangs emerge from the socio-economic problem that we have. You must remember Phoenix is a very poor area. A lot of poor people live here. There's a huge unemployment problem. And this starts when people try to become entrepreneurs and look for businesses to open or to survive. And one of the easiest businesses to get into is one of drugs. And this disease spreads to the community, especially to the youngsters and teenagers, and it grows. It grows in the same form as cancer, and then it just spreads and spreads and spreads.
But is it on the rise?
Yes, it is. The gangs are on the rise. They've modified themselves from 20 years ago with fighting with knives, etc. They now carry guns, automatic weapons. Unfortunately for us in Phoenix, we have a situation where we are not really being helped by law enforcement agencies. You see it, it's been mentioned in the press, on television, etc., that where police officers are involved in corruption, assisting gangs, allowing them to own firearms legally. And this makes it a lot worse than what's presently happening.
That's the one side of it, the police involvement, because there have been a lot of allegations on that. But then there's also the community involvement, because as we know, in many cases, these gangsters and the heads of these syndicates are also helping the community or protecting their interests in a sense.
Yes, that's true. Like we said, the community is very poor. What gangsters normally do is that they look after the poorer people. By that, I mean, if you look around us, the place that we live in is very claustrophobic. There's huge blocks of flats. Lots of people live in it. And the poor people cannot afford to pay the rent, lights and water. So these drug dealers, gangsters, they sponsor or they finance these poor homes and families. And they ask in return that these people pay or look after the goods that needs to be sold.
Thanks for that. Viveka, that's Glenn Naidu of KZN VIP Security. As you can hear, this is quite a complex issue and one that takes much more time to really get into. But the gist of it is that there are gangs in this area. It is a problem for law enforcement officials, for both those that are trying to tackle this problem, but also on the other side, as Glenn Naidu just mentioned now, in terms of those police that are also on the side of these drug dealers and that are being supported in a sense. So certainly one that needs a lot more time to really get into.
And that is a common story you hear about authorities, which makes it even more difficult to tackle. Thank you very much, Des and Tati.